Introduction. The purpose of this paper is to propose the establishment of an economic subcommittee as one of the subcommittees of the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, UN-COPUOS, sponsored by the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, UNOOSA. Currently, the UN-COPUOS has two subcommittees: the Science and Technology Subcommittee to promote space development, and the Legal Committee to discuss laws and treaties related to the use of outer space. Until now, the role of the Subcommittee on Science and Technology has been mainly focused on space development at the national level, through national projects and international cooperation, because science and technology are still in their infancy. In addition, the Legal Subcommittee, which discusses various rules and regulations in space, is a public domain that does not belong to any country, has been equally important. The decisions made by these two subcommittees were voted on by the General Assembly, which led to an international consensus on the safe and peaceful use of outer space. However, the situation has changed drastically in the last decade or so, with the development of rockets, satellites and spacecraft by private companies, and even plans for flights to the Moon and Mars can now be made by private companies. Even though various regulations can be enforced through international consultations on the development of science and technology, we believe that there is a need for a place where representatives of space companies, who are the parties concerned, can speak out and make proposals on technologies and demands related to the development of the space economy. In particular, space will become a place where the general public can go and use. It will no longer be something that can be controlled by mere science, technology or laws, as it has in the past, and it will be important to discuss it from the perspective of private business for the economic development of the entire planet. In this paper, we will discuss possible future economic activities in space and the various economic effects generated by them, following by a summary on the necessity and issues for the establishment of an economic subcommittee in UN-COPUOS for the future construction and development of a space economic zone. This paper is based on the idea that outer space should not be used as a battlefield between human beings and is compiled for the economic development and evolution of the entire Earth, or humanity as a whole, using space. It is possible that this is not what the interest industries of various countries have in mind, or that the idea is the exact opposite, but given the scale of the new civilian space industry in the age when ordinary people can go to space, the peaceful exploration of space will have far greater benefits and economic effects than those existing interests on Earth. 2. The future possibility of economic activity in space. Regarding economic activities in space, it is very difficult to isolate them, and they may eventually become all-encompassing, but we would like to consider the necessity of an international space economy subcommittee by dividing them into cases. We believe that this can be applied to most other items as well. 2.1. The future of economic activity on the International Space Station. The International Space Station has been used not only as an international cooperation project under the Space Station Agreement by the countries participating in the Space Station program, but also as a place for private space travelers to travel. So far, space travel has been conducted using the Russian Space Agency's Soyuz spacecraft through Space Adventure, but from now on, more and more services will be provided by private space companies such as Axiom Space and SpaceX. Of course, when using the infrastructure of the ISS, it is natural that there will be a cost burden for the ISS project. In the future, it will be important to determine what laws and conditions apply to various services provided inside the ISS, such as the use of products and services brought in individually. This will no longer be limited to issues between the International Space Station project, the administrator of the ISS, and companies that operate space travel. International trade in services will take place in space when goods and services left in the ISS are used by another private company or customer in another country. Furthermore, goods and services created in space will have different ownership and copyrights from those of the International Space Station project. We will have to think beyond the Earth's framework and interests to determine whether these rights should be managed within the Earth's framework or whether it is more efficient to create new laws and rules specific to space. Since the International Space Station is inevitably close to Earth, it may be tempting to apply earthly thinking, and since the spacecraft has been operated through international cooperation, priority has been given to international discussions. However, considering the future economic activities and development on the ISS, it is necessary to consider the best interests of service providers and customers, and to prioritize economic development and cooperative service provision instead of regulation. At this time, considering the further development of the ISS, it may be possible to consider the idea that the United Nations, which does not belong to any country, will take over the responsibility of the ISS, instead of the participating countries managing and operating it, so that it will be equally available to all UN member countries. 2.2. Economic activities in space. Economic activities in space could include satellite communications and fueling. Such physical services are very easy to understand. But what if, for example, ordinary people went on a space trip to orbit Earth? In a normal way of thinking, the travelers might be bound by the laws of the country that owns the spacecraft. But what about when a spacecraft from two different countries dock? It is easy to imagine that the rules of each country would apply. But what if those rules go against each other? Sometimes the rules may restrict economic activities. In such cases, if we can solve the problem using economic theories instead of legal theories, we may be able to solve the problem in a progressive way without restricting economic activities. There is a possibility that we can come up with a solution from the perspective of our customers and each other's corporate interests, instead of solving the problem with the law. For example, on Earth, it is similar to the issue of copyright. Normally, if using a copyrighted work without permission, it may be considered copyright infringement or a violation of copyright law. However, if there is a mutual benefit between the copyright owner and the user, it is possible to use the work beyond the boundaries of the law. This is because we believe that in the new space economy, rather than creating regulations, it is better to give top priority to the merits of the parties' concerns, and to go beyond national frameworks and laws to make decisions among the related parties, to minimize and resolve the problem quickly. If we can create a system where we can reduce the intervention of the law, the related parties can solve problems on a case-by-case basis, allowing economic activities in space to develop more actively. However, if an unexpected problem arises and needs to be solved quickly by an outside force, it will take a long time to solve the problem if it is left as an issue between countries. Therefore, if there is a process to propose and decide on solutions that are beneficial to both parties beyond national frameworks, the Subcommittee on Space Economics should be established within the United Nations, for economic activities in space to proceed smoothly. 2.5. Economic activities on the Moon. Economic activities on the Moon are the most simple example. The Moon is positioned as a so-called international public place that does not belong to any one country. If a country is given ownership of the Moon, there is a possibility of war on the Moon. On the other hand, if we don't give ownership to anyone, the Moon will remain an unexplored place, a place only for a few researchers to study. By giving ownership of the Moon's land to individuals or companies, we can make the Moon a place where no country owns and where economic activities can take place. In that case, a new subcommittee on space economy, to be created within the UNOOSA, would be responsible for making sure that no country claims ownership, which would promote the development of a lunar economy. 2.6. Economic activities on Mars. Economic activities on Mars are similar to those on the Moon. The difference is that no one has reached Mars yet, and there is a possibility that a private company's spacecraft will reach Mars before a country does. In such case, the Subcommittee on Space Economics will be in charge of making sure that the rights of the private companies are not bound by the rights of the state, but rather by humanity as a whole can enjoy the feat and offer authority to the companies that made it happen. In that case, peaceful economic activities on Mars can be carried out smoothly. However, companies involved in military development should be exempted from this rule, otherwise Mars may become a battlefield. 2.7. Economic activities during interstellar travel. Interstellar travel can take months or years. During this time, it becomes difficult to have a stable life or to return home in an emergency. It may be similar to a world cruise on a ship. As for interstellar travel, there are various possible patterns depending on which planet the travelers are moving from. One example is the case of moving to the Moon with goods produced on Mars, or returning from Mars to Earth. In the case of moving things between the stars, problems of economic disparity between the stars, trade frictions between imports and exports, and tariffs may occur, just like the economic disparity between nations and trade frictions between imports and exports on Earth. Alternatively, if the stock of food and other life-threatening items is greatly reduced along the way, the value of food and other items may increase rapidly. Even in such cases, to avoid personal conflicts among passengers, we need a system that can provide equal and stable services at all times, based on the common peace principle of humanity. We must no longer think in terms of Earthlings, but in terms of solar system people, or a variety of problems will arise. We think it is necessary to give priority to the rights and interests of space travelers when providing services in such a scope. 2.8. Asteroid economic activities. The ownership of resources on asteroids has been discussed in the past, and laws are being developed in various countries. However, in the future, when individuals will be able to travel to asteroids, there may be discoveries and inventions that do not belong to any country or company. In such cases, it will be necessary to establish a system to guarantee the rights of ownership and patents to the entire human race, beyond the scope of national governments. 3. Result and discussion. We have listed various examples in Section 2, but they are only hints to consider the necessity of establishing an economic subcommittee within the UN corpus. Since the need has not been important so far, the Subcommittee on the Economy of Outer Space has not been established yet. One thing we can say is that outer space and stars other than Earth do not belong to any country or even to Earth. It is a fact that we, as human beings living on Earth, must treat them as something different. Until now, space development has been within the control of countries and private companies tied to countries. However, from now on, regardless of nationality or company, ordinary people all over the world will be able to go to space. Robots created by ordinary people will go to space, or we will be able to use space from Earth without going to space. At that time, we need to think about the peaceful use of outer space from the perspective of economic development, not only technological development and solving legal problems. And in that case, we think the best solution at this moment is to create jurisdiction within the United Nations. Alternatively, we could create a new space economic federation that is separate from the UN. We may need an organization to cooperatively explore space with a new concept that is not based on defense, military power, or money. 4. Conclusion. The conclusion of this paper is that in the situation where the space economy is going to be activated in the future, there is no organization on Earth that oversees the development of the space economy and that it is necessary to create a new organization to play this role. In every country, there is a department responsible for economic and industrial development. Every country has a department responsible for economic and industrial development, and the United Nations has an organization responsible for economic and social development. Similarly, it is easy to imagine the need for an organization that has jurisdiction over the space economy. However, it does not exist at present. In the coming era of space travel, it is only a matter of time before the sphere of human life, economic sphere, leaves the surface of Earth and extends to outer space, the Moon and Mars, as it has already begun. We believe that it is important to consider the economic development in space as a benefit for the entire Earth, not as a benefit for any one country or company, but to come to propose the establishment of a subcommittee on space economy in the United Nations. This paper is intended to be a starting point for discussions to establish a subcommittee on the space economy in the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, or to create an alternative space economy organization. We hope that this paper will lead to activities for the peaceful development of space economy and serve as a basis for activities to expand the sphere of human activities into outer space peacefully without fighting between countries or companies. We hope that the money, time, and effort that all human beings have been spending on weapons can be creatively used for the peaceful use of space and the expansion of humanity's sphere of life.